I seen them big red eyes, we were out of there. Can't tell you what the rest of it looks like.
There's no actual proof that he caused the collapse.
The witnesses all described the same thing, a faceless, red-eyed freak.
Think that we were crazy, but, they said we know what we saw. And
some speculated that Mothman caused the collapse somehow.
Something those witnesses will never forget.
The Mothman.
In front of what locals call the igloo. That's where Mothman was first sighted.
The women were said to be hospitalized for shock.
we were afraid that people would laugh at us.
People were split on whether Mothman was good or evil.
Could it have been some type of mutated bird of 50s and 60s sci-fi fear? Or was Mothman really here to warn the river people?
Hello everybody, it's me again. If you don't know who I am, my name is Malachi, and I'm part of a small team of paranormal investigators or researchers. But my true passion lies in history, specifically urban legends and myths. But there is a small town in West Virginia that kind of blurs the lines between legends and facts. The small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a very interesting place in mine and many others' opinions. But the real question is why? Why does this small town have a movie about it? Why is there a book? And more importantly, why do thousands of people flood to this city every year? Well, you can explain this mystery with one word, or rather one name, the Mothman. But what is the Mothman? Is it some off-brand superhero that dresses up like a moth rather than a bat? While some people might say it was just a person dressing up, but I would say a lot more people believe that the Mothman is some kind of humanoid creature that haunted Point Pleasant from the first sighting on November 1966 to December 15th, 1967, when a very real tragedy struck the town. But before we can talk about the Mothman or any of the other weird goings-on of Point Pleasant, we have to talk about the bloody history of how the town was founded. In the 1600s, the Shawnee Native tribe populated the Ohio Valley area, which included what we know as Point Pleasant today. The earliest estimations of their populations ranged between 3,000 to 50,000, but it is now believed that the closest estimation would be around 10,000 Shawnees. The Shawnees were forced out of their native lands in the 1640s by the Iroquois Confederacy, which included 5 tribes: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes during the Beaver Wars. In short, the tribes that made up the IC hunted beavers to depletion in their territories, so they invaded the Ohio River Valley to continue selling beaver pelts. This led to a series of battles between the Lenape and Delaware tribes, who were backed by the French, and the IC tribes that I mentioned before. The IC won, and the Shawnee tribe basically said fuck this shit and migrated to a few different states including Illinois, Maryland, and Delaware, before deciding to come back after the conflict in the 1700s. Our main character for the moment is a native man named Cornstalk. I couldn't figure out if he was a chief when the Shawnees returned to the Ohio Valley, but historians speculate that he was born in 1727. Where is unknown for sure. However, it's believed that he was born in Pennsylvania, or the province of Pennsylvania as it was known at the time. We also know he first appeared in documents as a hostage that was handed over to the British in peace negotiations that ended Pontiac's War, which was also known as Pontiac's Rebellion. He was also believed to have led a raid against the British-American colonists in the same war. Cornstalk also played a major role in defending the Ohio River Valley, and was a primary war chief in Lord Dunmar's War, which led to the Battle of Point Pleasant, which was lost to the Virginia militia on October 10, 1774. The loss weakened the bond between the Shawnee and other native tribes as well as the British. The Virginia militia erected Fort Randolph after their victory, and just 3 years later, Cornstalk, along with his son and 2 others, made a diplomatic visit to the fort to learn American intentions. Instead of the hospitality they hoped for, they were taken as prisoners. They were reportedly treated well until another unrelated native man shot and killed a soldier in anger. This led to an enraged mob forming and storming Cornstalk's cabin. The colonist mob shot and killed Cornstalk and the other prisoners, with Cornstalk's last words cursing the land for 200 years for killing his son and his men in front of him. By the year 1781, settlers had established themselves around Fort Blair, and the town of Point Pleasant was officially chartered in 1794. The town began to grow through the rest of the 17 and 1800s, thriving off of the rivers that the town sat on. River transportation and boat building dominated the economy in the 19th century, and the population began to rise, reaching its peak at 6,122 people in 1970. But that's not important to our story. Many people say the story of Mothman begins in November 1966, when two married couples fled from the being. But the sightings of strange creatures and lights in the Appalachian region are rooted throughout time. Things like the large ape sightings of 1964 that sparked debate about the Wampus cat that had allegedly stalked the Appalachian regions for centuries, or the Flatwood monster sightings in 1952. Note that Flatwoods is only an hour and 20 minutes away from Point Pleasant. Another occurrence that has been very well documented in the region is the Brown Mountain Lights.
Binoculars on it.
What the hell is that? Front of the edge of the
Who's
mountain.
got the binoculars?
It's got to be an airplane or something.
No, an aircraft would have red and green nav lights and a strobe.
It's moving.
Oh, wow.
It's moving to the left, is it?
There's an airplane.
Well,
up
no,
above
look
it.
at the top of Table Rock.
So needless to say, the paranormal activity in 1966 and 1967 is nothing new to the region. Hell, the Mothman wasn't even the first cryptid to be sighted in the area in 1966. In fact, just 13 days before the first Mothman sighting, a strange smiley being who claimed his name was Ingrid Cold was spotted in Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is about an hour's drive from Point Pleasant. The man who encountered Ingrid Cold was named Woodrow Derenberger, and stated that he had heard a loud crashing noise while driving down Interstate 77, and watched as an unidentifiable flying vehicle landed in front of his truck. Woodrow watched as an apparent human man stepped out of the UFO, with an unnaturally large grin on his face. Ingrid Cold was said to have telepathically communicated to Woodrow his name, and that he meant Woodrow no harm. He explained how he was only curious about humankind. He also stated that he originated from a planet known to him as Lanulus, from the galaxy of Geminids. I couldn't find any statements on how the encounter had ended, but I can only assume that Ingrid Cold flew off in his spaceship, bumping Party in the USA by Hannah Montana at full volume. The catchy tune must have caught the attention of the Mothman because, as I said earlier, 13 days later, he was caught hanging out in the well-known TNT area, just outside of Point Pleasant. That big birdie must have been pretty pissed off because he chased the party foulers at almost 100 miles an hour down a dark country road. All jokes aside, the two couples that I had mentioned earlier, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, really were chased into town after they had sighted what we know as the Mothman in the TNT area, and later stated to the police that the being was gaining on them at 80 miles per hour. The couples thought that they would be seen as crazy, but when the police began to receive more and more phone calls about an 8 to 10 foot tall birdman, the couples didn't look as bad as they thought they might. Newspapers began to report on the situation, leading to more call-ins of the creature being sighted. Undoubtedly, some of these sightings were hoaxes, but when two firemen saw the creature, I believe that things would have felt at least a little more real because of their role in the community. Sure, any old town drunk could say they saw a moth person, but when law enforcement starts seeing things, shit's probably going down. Even though the firefighters did say it was just a large bird with red eyes, it brings some credibility to some of the other sightings. The county sheriff also went on record saying that he believed the being was nothing more than an unusually large heron that he called a shite poke. About 50 miles away from Point Pleasant, a man named Kenneth Duncan claimed to have seen the Mothman while he was digging a grave with a group of men. He claimed to have watched the creature take flight off of a tree on the other side of the cemetery. He later stated that the creature looked humanoid in appearance, but unlike the Mallettes in the Scarberry story, Duncan was the only one out of the group that had seen the being. Yet another report of the Mothman in Point Pleasant is made by a man named Bob Bosworth. He states that one night him and a couple friends rode their motorcycles to the TNT area and saw the being in one of the many buildings. He said that the being walked towards them while staying in the shadows. He said that he hadn't noticed any red eyes, likely because it was too dark for light to reflect them, in his opinion. He said that the creature turned around when it noticed the men, and they heard what sounded like wings when the creature was out of sight. By November 18th, the Mothman had made headlines, and people were actively searching for the creature. This led to Faye DeWitt Laporte's encounter with her brothers and sister. In the interview that she did with Small Town Monsters, she reports on one of the many nights that she had visited the TNT area with her family. She notices her brother staring at her, and she asks him what he's looking at. And she recalls that he said, "Don't look, but there's something behind you." Faye states that when she looked out of her window, she couldn't tell if the creature was running or flying due to the darkness of the area, but it was keeping up with the car. Faye's brother sped up his car, but he couldn't lose the being, so he made a sharp left turn into one of the buildings in the TNT area to no avail. The being kept pace. Turn after turn, the being stayed on the car until they were forced to stop. The Mothman hopped onto the hood of the car and stared at Faye and her siblings before hopping off the car and running to a 5-story building. Faye states that the being then jumped to the 5th floor of the building. She said she saw no wings when the being jumped to the 5th floor until her brother started to antagonize the being by throwing rocks at it and chewing it away. That's when the being finally opened its reportedly massive set of wings and flew off into the sky. Although Mothman is likely the most famous anomaly from Point Pleasant, from that time period at least, other strange things did occur, such as the strange lights in the sky spotted by people like Tad Jones only 48 miles away from the town, and the Men in Black sightings around the town. Though it's said that the reports of the strange men in suits only came after John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, released in 1975, which makes sense because John Keel actually coined the term Men in Black. That's not to say the sightings didn't exist before the term did, but it does seem like the book may have influenced some people's accounts of the events in Point Pleasant. Another detail recounted by some witnesses after the book was released are strange phone calls by Ingrid Cole, who we talked about earlier, which is suspicious because the whole book is about a journalist that gets strange phone calls by, you guessed it, Ingrid Cole, who tells the protagonist events that will happen in the future, hence the usage of the term prophecy in the title.
Who is this?
My name is Ingrid Cole.
Unless, of course, you're Gordon Smallwood.
Your father was born in Racine, Wisconsin. He lived in a green house on Monroe Street. You don't remember how your mother looked.
It actually features Ingrid Cole more than the Mothman himself, which was very disappointing for me when I watched the movie after my visit to Point Pleasant, as I was expecting it to be more of a monster thriller than a drama. To John Keel's credit, it was still a very good movie. Now I could probably go on about the Mothman for hours, and I will make a video about the Mothman specifically one day, because Point Pleasant isn't the only place that he's allegedly been sighted. In fact, he's been credited for the Blackbird of Chernobyl sightings, and similar sightings in Chicago, Illinois of all places. But as for the Mothman's time in Point Pleasant in 1966 and 1967, it all seemed to lead up to one thing, and that would be the Silver Bridge collapse. Some witnesses say that there seemed to be a strange air in Point Pleasant in the days leading to the collapse. But Mothman tells aside, let's talk about the facts. The Silver Bridge was designed by the J.E. Grainer Company and built by the Gallia County Ohio River Bridge Company, or later known as West Virginia Ohio Bridge Company, and its subcontractor U.S. Steel's American Bridge Company in 1927. The 2-lane, 1,760-foot I-bar suspension bridge only took 1 year to complete. opening on Memorial Day of 1928. The original design featured conventional wire cables, but that idea was scrapped when the companies involved realized using I-bar chains would be a cheaper method. Though there was an I-bar suspension bridge built in 1924 in Brazil, the Silver Bridge was the first of its kind in the US and was reported as so in the Engineering News Records article in 1929. It was also noted in the same magazine that the bridge could not be adjusted due to its design. In the years, months, and even days leading up to the bridge, inspections were done on the bridge, resulting in $30,000 worth of repairs. The last inspection was done on December 6th, 1967, which was only 9 days before the collapse. On December 15, 1967, in the midst of the Mothman sightings and the strange lights in the sky, the bridge that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia to its twin city, Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed with a gunshot-like noise being heard. The fall of the bridge has been described as folding like a deck of cards. The bridge fell in less than 20 seconds, taking 32 cars and 46 victims with it, 2 of which were never found. Both towns very quickly commissioned boats to search for the bodies of the victims and their vehicles in the same day of the collapse. And with that, our story ends. After the collapse of the bridge, it seemed the whole town had forgotten about the Mothman and all of its strangeness, with very few articles reporting on it after the fact. Everyone knew someone that had been lost to the river, and the town focused on grieving the men, women, and children that had died that fateful day. The town has erected several monuments in honor of the victims in order to never forget those lost. The town also holds Mothman-related events, such as the Mothman Festival, and they even have a small museum and statue to commemorate those strange times. I'd also like to note that I have been to the museum and I loved every second of it, and I even got to touch the infamous shiny hiney. But with that, I hope you all have a great day, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all of that good stuff. I would also like to say thank you to the Small Town Monsters channel, as well as the Y-Files channel, as I used their videos for points of reference in this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'm looking forward to bringing you more informational videos as well as ghost hunts. I can't thank you guys enough for the support, and I hope to see you guys next time.